Hey everyone, this is Zach, one of the hosts of Shuffle Repeat. I just wanted to add a little disclaimer to the beginning of this episode. We had some audio issues while recording this one, and I've done my very best to salvage it. I think I was able to rescue about 99% of the episode, but I'm still learning how to edit, and there's a few easily fixable changes to our recording process that we're going to make for next time. Anyway, there might be some very minute choppiness or some minor mic issues on my end during this episode. I just ask that you please bear with us as we work out the last of these kinks, and I hope you guys enjoy the show. Thanks. Alright, this is Shuffle Repeat. I am Zach.
And I'm Ian.
This is a music podcast where we talk about the obscure and not so obscure world of popular music and not so popular music. This is our second episode. Right now, we're using these early episodes of the show just to give you guys an idea of where our tastes lie, what kind of music we like, to give you a feel for what makes us tick. I guess let's hop right into it. Do you want to start with one of yours?
Yeah, sure. I can throw one of mine up. Let's see here. I was most curious about your take on this one because you said you actually really enjoyed it. Let's kick off with Blue Notebooks by Max Richter.
Oh, okay, yeah, great. So who is Max Richter? I know you said that you came to know about him through our friend Max.
Yeah, he is a classical composer, I believe German-born British composer is what his wiki says. He's done a lot of soundtracking, so a lot of movies will have his work woven throughout, and I'd say I probably knew at least a couple of his pieces before I even knew who he was, watching various movies. Particularly track 2 on this album, On the Nature of Daylight, that's shown up a lot. But the album we're talking about here, his 2004 album, Blue Notebooks, as I stated. And one thing that was interesting looking this one up, apparently it was mostly written as a protest album against the Iraq War, a meditation on violence and futility of armed conflict in general. And as a guy who's listened to as much punk as I have, it's really intriguing to hear a classical album centered around the same themes.
Yeah, is the narration that's present on the album reflective of that? I gotta be honest, I listened to this one at a pretty low volume, so the spoken word bits, I didn't catch a lot of what they were saying. Is that on theme?
Those, fun fact to start off, the narrator on this is Tilda Swinton, famed actress, and most of what she's reading on this is works of Franz Kafka, and I forget his first name, but Milosz, who I believe was a Polish-born poet who lived in America for a long while, to fairly high regard within literary circles. The readings seem a bit more oblique to the protest theme, but yeah, it definitely gets you in a mood where you're contemplating, and the theme is woven in there lightly, but maybe a bit obliquely.
Like I said, I really like this one. I'm not really that familiar with modern classical. I think there was a brief moment in middle or high school where somebody first points out that, oh, heavy metal is just modern day classical, and that old kind of cliche. Tried to get into it, and it just really didn't hit home with me. As much music as I listen to, what's the politically correct way to put this? I don't really know anything about theory or music composition, so I think a lot of the appeal is lost on me as far as the real classics go. I'm a lyrics guy, and that's probably something people will pick up on as they listen to this show. I'm really into singer-songwriters. I'm big into the lyrical side of things, or just vocalists in general. Normally if something really sticks out to me, especially when you're dealing with harsh metal vocals like Death or Black, it's because the dude has a weird voice. That's what, makes me pay attention. Now there is some exceptions to that, and I think we're going to talk about one of those a little bit later with Chapel of Disease. But I think because of that, of all the genres out there, I paid the least amount of attention to it. I guess it doesn't really explain my interest in jazz, but I think the reason I like jazz is because a lot of people think it's annoying.
Why not be a little contrarian about it?
But I do legitimately enjoy that stuff. It's not just to be annoying.
Yeah.
So this one, for a first visit into modern classical, it made me pay more attention. I think the only other really modern classical album I'm familiar with is that album by Inhuman Kind that we talked about on our old show once, which is basically just
oh yeah, that was a weird one.
Heavy metal music played by a classical string quartet or trio, I think. So that one's a little bit different. I wouldn't really say these are companion pieces, but that was definitely the first step into me giving this stuff a chance. It actually reminded me a lot of this, an odd point of comparison, but I don't know if you ever listened to the rapper Blue, B-L-U.
I don't think I have.
He has an album, and I think it's the Below the Heavens album, but it might be a mixtape or something, because it's been a long time since I've listened to any of his work. And it's intercut with these monologues from some Shakespearean romantic comedy from Britain. I can't think of what it's called right now, but it's just sort of this somber piano music, and this album actually reminded me of that too. It's very reflective, but somebody I saw in the YouTube comments that it's a message of hope buried in misery.
Huh.
Because you do pick up on that. It is a hopeful recording, but at the same time it is very sad music, which I guess if he's like sort of existentially looking at war, makes sense.
One thing that does it for me, as far as classical music, I do tend to check out on really big orchestral stuff, just because it gets to be so much going on. I'd say at least a third of this album is just piano, and even the more involved pieces, you may have a couple string instruments and kind of a droning electronic bass element to it. Shadow Journal being the one song in particular that probably is my favorite on the album, and it's kind of a violin over a electronic pattern the whole time.
Yeah, it kind of has a feel of like even though I think there are usually more than one instrument going at once, it kind of has like the feeling of a lone pianist at a fancy cocktail bar around closing, you know?
Yeah, it's very, very minimalist for classical, and honestly, it makes me think I should try to just check out minimalism as a subgenre in general. If it's anything like this, I'd probably like it a lot.
Oh, I'm glad you said that, because I never knew that the dude from Talk Talk did a solo album, which is described as a minimalist jazz cocktail lounge album, so I'm really curious to throw that on in the next couple weeks.
Oh yeah, he did, didn't he?
Mark Hollis, that's his name, from Talk Talk. It was bugging me, but I know you just got into Spirit of Eden and Laughingstock recently, and that's a conversation I definitely want to have. All right, let's talk about my next one, which is Rises Ex Mortis by Rigor Sardonicous. So this is a pretty recent find for me. I don't know how we missed this, and I really am trying to avoid talking about the old show because I know we're probably going to have some new listeners, but one of the things we did on the old show was a Funeral Doom Spotlight episode where a third of the show we talked about the origins of Funeral Doom, the other half we talked about more modern stuff, then the last third of the show was a run-through of David Lee Roth's discography. Anyway, but the point I'm getting at is, as far as like the old school originators of the genre, somehow we missed Rigor Sardonicous because their first album, which this is a re-recording of, I think dropped in 1990, maybe 1991, and I'm really sad that we missed them. This is one of the most wildly different Funeral Doom albums I think I've ever heard. What'd you think of this one?
This time I thought to actually make notes on everything I listened to, so this is good. First things first, it did not put the foot forward that had you guessing what was coming next. The intro sounded like it was actually going to be a little happy in a fucked up way, but was listening to that thinking, this is what we're doing? This is going to be cool, but that's unexpected. But then when it hits that grinding main riff and the drum machine kicks in and they have these super deep pitch shifted vocals, it's like, oh, this is going to be really weird, isn't it? More than anything else, my big overriding thought was, if you threw in a couple sick horror samples, you'd have a Doom Mortician going, in a way.
Yeah, I can see that. It is a mind-melting album, which isn't necessarily something I'd normally associate with Funeral Doom. I don't know if they've ever really fully embraced the Funeral Doom label. I think an argument, as if you wanted to be a genre purist, could probably be made that this isn't Funeral Doom, just because of so much of what Funeral Doom is just about that slow, kind of steady, monotonous pace. And this doesn't really have that, because like you said, there's these gore grind moments, there's just straight-ahead death metal stuff, where it sounds like Mortician worship, and then more just traditional Doom. Some sludge in there for good measure. It's just got everything going on for it, which is why I wanted to talk about it. I think if you were trying to ease yourself into Funeral Doom, this might be a good place to start. Or if you're someone who maybe has tried Funeral Doom before and just, nah, fuck that, just not for me. Just show there's a little bit more going on there than what might meet the surface sometimes, because this isn't the only weird Funeral Doom band that I've found. I know there's that one German act that we're both fond of, whose name I could never remember, the one that's like Candlemass meets Funeral Doom.
Candlemass meets Funeral. Not German, but Mournful Congregation?
I can see that, but no. It was that one album project.
Shoot. Yeah, it had a boat on it. German Funeral Doom albums with boats on it are always a good thing. Shouts out to Ahab.
But we'll come back to that one someday, because Weird Funeral Doom, that would be another one to put on the future episode list. I want to talk about that guy that pretends he's an alien.
Yeah, if nothing else, I get to gush over esoteric then, so I'll take every opportunity for that. One thought that that is related, but I want to tangentially throw it out there. Do you think God of Thunder is the most covered song in metal?
Probably not, but I get your point. It does seem like people's go-to, because who all, like, Death did it, which is probably my favorite version of the song. And then, did Bathory do it on the terrible album, Octagon? Or was that another Kiss song?
I think he did a different Kiss song on that, but I wouldn't write it off that he did it in his solo albums. Obviously, Rigor Sardonicous did it here, which is why I bring it up. One of my uncles actually knows who the Melvins are just because of their God of Thunder cover.
Melvins, they did that whole thing. They did solo EPs where they're in full Kiss makeup as a tribute to the infamous Kiss solo records. I don't know. I'm probably not going to subject you to much of it on the show, but I'm a huge Kiss stan. I love them. But God of Thunder, I'm kind of glad there's so many different versions of it, because it's one of my least favorite Kiss songs, just because of the producer's kids prattling on in the background. I think it ruins it. It's also just weird because it's about being a sexual god, and then there's children giggling in the background. But yeah, anyway, I think I did mention this one is a re-recording of their demo, which came out in 94. I looked it up. I've been trying to find an original version of it just to see how it stacks up. And it just seems to be completely scrubbed from the internet. I can't find it anywhere, which sucks. Because if it was just I'm curious about it for two reasons. I just want to know, were they this experimental from the get-go? And also just because if it was a little bit more raw and primitive sounding, I think that would make me like it all the more.
It's still not a clean production, but it's a little nicer once it gets going than I would have expected.
All right, you want to move on to your next one?
Sure. Yeah, conversely, I'm going to keep the vibe going. Let's hop over to Coffinworm. I know this was one of the last ones you got to, and that's even not knowing what they sounded like. I can see why this would be at the bottom of the list for my choices.
There was two reasons for that. One, because I thought that I had heard them before, and I was a little short on time. But like I told you, I think I was thinking of one of the other 50 bands that has Coffin or Worm in their name. But also, I've been doing most of my listening in the morning, and I know some people can do it, but Black and Sludge at 7 a.m., a hard sell for me.
It's a rough way to start your day.
I envy those people that can wake up and go right to Cyber Grind first thing in the morning, and that's all they'll ever listen to. But I have to ease into things.
Definitely. Guess we haven't said already. This is 418 by Coffinworm. Their second and also their final, unfortunately. And it is pure black and sludge metal. Caustic, intense, can slow down to real gloomy crawl. It's not a feel-good album. It is pretty damn far from a feel-good album, but a tight riffing, and it is heavy as hell. I would say it's a really good compliment to some of their more known luminaries. It's a bit like Dragged into Sunlight, Lord Mantis's sound. These guys are intense, and man, I wish they were still around to put more out. I gotta wonder if playing music like this can drag you down a little bit, because nobody in those bands is ever happy. Though I guess if you're gonna write music like this, you're not exactly in a good state of mind anyway.
Well, that reminds me of when we did the Funeral Doom episode. I think of 10 picks that we did, it was, I think 4 or 5 bands had suicides in them, some multiple. Same that with Sludge a lot, too. Although with Sludge, it's more OD.
Yeah, there's a lot more ODs in Sludge.
Which sucks, but I guess it does add a sort of twisted level of sincerity to the whole thing.
You kind of know it's coming from a certain place. We talked about it just in our dry run, covering Purple Mountains. As depressing and probably twisted as it is, knowing how badly somebody felt it to that kind of level lends a certain authenticity to it, which can make it really hard to listen to, but at the same time, it amplifies the feeling in the music so strongly.
I don't really know how to describe it. Makes you feel a little dirty for liking it as much. It feels a little, maybe exploitive is the word. But I don't know what I'm talking about. I have a subscription to Death Addicts and Documenting Reality. Every time Caitlin leaves for an afternoon, I just spend all day watching industrial accidents on the 65-inch TV. Anyway, you want to talk about Sneaker?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So another full 180. I know I had them labeled as Steely Dan worship. You mentioned that for you, this album, which is just their self-titled album, Sneaker, had more of an Ambrosia feel to it. I mean, I definitely agree with that. It's been a long time since I heard this one. I used to have this album on vinyl, and I think I got rid of it at one point. Regret that I did, because apparently, at least if a couple-year-old YouTube commenter believed, this hasn't been reissued on CD yet.
It was hard enough to track down on YouTube, from what I recall. Like, somebody just uploaded it a couple months ago.
I think that is probably at least somewhat influenced by the Beyond Yacht Rock podcast when they were doing one of their Yacht or Not things, because I think they brought up more than just the two of us. Or no, Don't Let Me In, the Steely Dan song.
Very literally.
I think that was like maybe one of the songs that they recorded 10 times and then lost the masters to and just said fuck it.
One of the Gaucho ones or something like that.
Yeah, because I know there's a couple lost Dan tracks that have just stories like that where they just put a ton of time into it and then something got effed up, and then they just never went back to it.
Because that take was the perfect take.
But yeah, Sneaker is, well, literally a West Coast band, but that's probably how I'd best describe their sound is West Coast. That term, West Coast was yacht rock before the term yacht rock existed. I don't like it because yacht rock has also been diluted as a term by XM radio and stuff. It doesn't really have the same panache as